appreciate it. Okay, real question. You've said on your show that life and status, especially is the word you used, is a zero-sum game, right?
Social status on some level, yes, is a zero-sum game.
Status.
Yeah.
Okay, so I disagree with it, and I feel that by elevating someone else's social status, I'm not losing any. So I'm just wondering.
I'm glad that's the case. I'm glad that you feel that. But tell me I'll give you an example. Give me your demographics.
White male.
White male, how old are you?
27.
Okay. Now, you may not feel this because you didn't grow up with this, but when I was 27, nearly every single television show that I saw as a child, do you know what the lead was? It was a white guy. Now,
the lead actor.
Yeah, the lead actors or the stories. Now, there was a couple of shows where, and I can name them, which I think almost proves my point, where the leads were not white. That was the Jeffersons, Good Times. Okay, that's it. And then there was, I think, a couple of spinoffs of those shows. Wait, what was the rerun on? What's Happening? What's Happening? So there was 3 shows.
Stipulated, Sam. Come on.
Well, my point being that the fact of the matter is that's not the case at all anymore. And there's a perfect example of how our culture has not centered people like yourself in television. It's also true with commercials. It's also true with, I think, probably in terms of literature in many respects.
And so you think because of that, I've lost some status?
Yeah.
You know,
not you.
There's no debate about
this. I feel like this is kind of a pedantic discussion of the definition of the word status, because status is definitionally relative. You can improve someone else's situation without taking away from your own, but status is our status relative to other people. And I think the cultural example is actually kind of a bad one to use in this case, because having cultural representation on TV is not something that improves the material circumstances of anyone.
But that's not the point. The point is, does having a
consider you be higher status or not?
Is diminishing one's cultural status in terms of how much in the culture they are represented, is that a zero-sum game? And my answer is yes. Now, is it possible if someone controlled all of our cultural representations that they could expand the number of representations? But the bottom line is the percentage in which
it's
you look
hierarchical,
around.
And then it becomes not hierarchical. That's zero sum. There's no way around that. And I will also say that where we want to make it seem like it's only zero sum in culture, there's also a zero sum dynamic economically. Because if you look at what happened in Brazil and you look at the complaints about what Lula's anti-poverty stuff did, rich people were complaining that they were making airports look like bus stations, right? So there is definitely a zero sum element to this. I don't know how this debate has.
Yeah, I don't even know how it's even remotely. Now, Jamie, wait a second. Before you say that none of this stuff is important, the only thing that's important is material, that's fine.
I'm not saying it's unimportant, but the material is more important.
That's fine. That's an opinion. It may be valid, but it does not implicate this conversation. And by that, I mean embroil, embesh, involve.
Well, it's the example that you used. I mean...
No. He asked me the question.
Yeah, and you answered it with this particular example.
He said...
Yeah, it was a narrow point that I got back, right?
Like, I think...
I'm saying in cultural representation, this is
wait,
true.
What are you talking about?
He's trying
what are
to say...
What are you talking about in terms of status, social status?
So I thought you meant how others perceive you in a society.
No, I'm talking about how you perceive yourself as represented in the culture, in the society.
Okay.
There are less white male congresspeople. There are less white male senators. There are less white male, I would argue, probably state legislators. I mean, I don't know. There are less white male doctors. there are less white men. Like every single aspect of society. Maybe there's some of that's not the case. Maybe teachers hasn't changed. But in all facets of our culture, white men have lost status as defined by representation, as defined by position and whatnot. Now, that may not be relevant to anything. I happen to think it is.
Used to be relevant to what real estate they could buy.
But
their status
I think it's very
relative to
relevant,
other
and
people.
I think that as
yes,
an individual
relative to other people,
of
status
that
is
class,
definitively
then,
That's how you
relative to
measure
people.
Oh yeah, go on then.
I mean, those are the sums you're measuring to see whether they go up in proportion with the other.
Yes, of course. It's you could do it by percentage or you could do it in real numbers. But my point is, when you look around, it's just different. And it's zero sum in that way. It's not about how you feel necessarily about how you feel about yourself. Different people can react to different things. I can feel very comfortable with the idea. In fact, I do. But there's a significant, but the reality is the reality. And there are...
Yeah, and that reality helps your status. Because, for example, other people now seeing you aren't going to say, oh, you know what? He's just in that position because he's white and male. Right? They still can to some extent, but it's less so.
But
I think as that,
But that's
as this
not
plays out, it's going
status.
to be-
That's just an assessment of your merit.
or your status.
No, status is a position. It is. It is. I mean, it's a thing. It's not a
So
feeling.
power is a zero-sum game.
Is power a zero-sum game? I would probably argue yes.
Yeah,
That's what I
and deconstructing hierarchies is also zero sum. I mean, this is
I think, okay, maybe I know where he's going with this. Potentially. Correct me if I'm wrong, caller. The idea that by improving the situations of other groups of people, we're not losing, the privileged are not necessarily losing anything, right? Like the relatively privileged in society, right? Like say...
Isn't that definitional? Like privilege just means relative to other
like
people
say-
that you get something that other people don't?
Like we're getting at this kind of mass politics, I think. And some people take offense to the idea that, I don't know, historically privileged groups like white people would be giving something up when what we're getting, hopefully, is some sort of social democratic program that helps everyone except the 1%.
I don't know what you're... I honestly
Like
don't.
that's the
I would
context
think
that I've
even the
heard this used in a
1% would
lot.
be helped. And I think I agree with you. I'm not sure that I wanted to get at this, I guess, yeah. But yeah, I would say even the 1% would be helped by a more democratic social structure.
How
no,
so?
Right.
no chance in hell.
No, I want to know, how is
No.
the 1% going to be
No.
helped?
So, for instance, they might feel more secure in the knowledge that, maybe their great-grandchildren will actually survive on the planet.
Yeah.
Or
Nah.
they might think, well, the masses won't rise up and kill me because
No.
everyone's, pretty well off and
No.
fine. Right?
No.
So,
That is not how
Yeah,
they think.
that-
That is... I
Yeah,
can tell
until
you-
the Great Leap Forward comes, they're not
might
going to think
Look,
like
they've
that.
always
The-
been class traders. They're few and far between, but they certainly exist.
But
and
just the fact that they're operating, they're hailed because they're operating supposedly against their best interests.
The left.
mean, look.
Here's the thing: the left needs to not act like it has something to offer Bill Gates. It doesn't.
It has nothing to offer
I mean,
Bill Gates.
Personally, I think it does. Like, I think a truly communist society where we regrow these social bonds, like even rich people have rising depression and anxiety right now because we live in such a messed up world where we're all atomized and we're all separated from each other. And I think, yes, they would be giving up their
Right.
status relative to other people, but they would also have all of their material needs provided for. So status would seek to mean anything in terms of your material circumstances. And I think they'd be a lot happier. Now, would they agree with me about this? Probably not. But I do
I'm
think
almost sure
Not all.
I do think
they would
that
not.
everyone
I would say they would not.
like I do think that this would be the best
yeah, I
system
mean,
for
like
everyone
Jeffrey
in the long
Epstein
term.
might not, but Bill Gates might be with you.
I'm quite sure Bill Gates would not be with you.
But for now, we need to
We can
remember
have
who
the,
our enemies are.
And-
DSA can start a 1% outreach
Right.
caucus.
I mean,
but
look,
I
Like
think
whether they would
listen,
be helped by it
I
or
think-
not
I
doesn't
think-
mean they're not going to fight
I think
against it.
it is unhelpful to assume
Agreed.
that that with a moment of clarity, people who are trying to prevent you or whose assessment of what your plan is will come around. I think it's just the bottom line is you want society to be one way, they want it to be the other, and the question is who's going to win in terms of their vision for society. And the fact of the matter is there are people who have lost status. There will people who will continue to lose status if there is a more egalitarian society that is definitional to the whole point of an egalitarian society. When you have one that is not egalitarian.
Like the Meghan McCain world.
Whatever, whoever it is, it doesn't matter.
They're going to,
or it could be people who you are sympathetic to. It could be people who you are sympathetic to. The bottom line is pursue, what you seek for society without having to convince yourself that that there are people who just don't understand that they're actually not losing something. They are going to be losing something. And that's
okay. So I'm not saying no one will lose anything. I'm saying that it's not true that you can say that you can point at someone's race or gender or whatever and say this person will lose something. I think that's my point.
Let me ask you a question. There's 10 people who are voting. They're all white men. Okay? Now I'm going to allow 11th person because we've decided to allow women to have a vote. When there was all white men, you're one of those voters. How much of the vote did you control? 10 people.
Yeah. I mean, I get it.
10%, right? 10%. Now, if you're one of 11, how much does your vote control?
Yeah, 9. And that's a little less than 10, huh?
Exactly.
May I finish with the tweet?
Appreciate the call.
My friend Neural, underrated account, Neural Liberalism on Twitter, his pinned tweet, and I quote, is, "Started at the bottom, but because status is relative and we live in a time of increasing inequality, now I'm here in a much lower place."
Okay. I'm not sure I follow.
Just thought it was a nice button to put on the whole status conversation.
It's a Drake reference, Sam.
Oh, is it? Oh.
Oh my God.
I had no idea.
I can't. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised at this point that Sam doesn't get musical references.
I had no idea.
It is.
I know Drake is a musician.
Crickets.
I know Drake is a musician for sure.
Oh my God.
I've definitely heard a. All right, we got one more call.